Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Star Trek Discoverage, the podcast, the live podcast, I should say, that boldly goes into excruciating detail about this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery. I'm your host, Caliban, and if you ever need to find out if someone is really from Seattle, ask them where the best place for avocado toast is, and then you can compare notes with them. I'm joined on the show, as usual, by Ella Pearson. She's the co-host of the Generations Geek podcast on the Chronic Rift Network, and she's also our featured guest for the evening. Welcome, Ella.
Hey, happy to finally be here.
Yeah. Boy, what is going on with CBS All Access?
You know, they're a brand new streaming service. I don't really blame them, but I wish they had predicted like a steady rise in viewers over the season, which I think is what might have happened.
Yeah,
but
I hope that's what's happening. I actually,
yeah, me too.
Speaking of millennials, I've got a caged millennial here. Something I'm interested to see, like if it's like a load, on the servers or whatever that technical thing is. You read about the problems on Twitter because you're a millennial. I found out when my PS4 kept asking me if I was connected to the internet, and I'm like, yes, I am. I actually saw a infographic this week from, I don't know, Parrot Analytics or something like that, and they said that in terms of like audience demand, and I'm not sure where these numbers come from, but they're just saying as far as the demand expression, Star Trek Discovery is far and away leading all of its competitors in the digital sphere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and even just for, and I don't know if this is like buzz or this is individual watches or consumptions of a show, but they're only behind Game of Thrones in terms of like what the audience demand is, and that's on a list with Rick and Morty, Walking Dead, American Horror Story, and so on and so forth. So they're up there.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah. Which is good, but sometimes it leads to problems. Like, when is this show going to start working here? Because I want to watch this thing. How do you watch the show? On TV or a laptop, phone, microwave?
We have been using our Roku on our TV.
Oh, sure.
Tonight, about halfway through, we switched over to the computer, and then it was smooth sailing.
Oh, okay, that's weird. Okay, so
Yeah.
the Roku is the computer on one kind of internet or cable, and the TV's
Nope.
on another, or it's all the same thing?
Same thing.
Huh. Okay. Well, I guess I wish I had an investigative reporter I could send after that, but we'll just have to wonder. And hope it doesn't continue in week 7. But this is week 6. We've just watched episode 6 of Star Trek Discovery entitled Lethe, and we're here to break it down for you. As always, we're setting a course for the spoiler zone, listeners, so be warned. We're glad you decided to join us, but if you haven't seen the episode, and with tonight's technical difficulties, it's possible that you haven't. Spoilers are incoming. The official synopsis for the episode this week is the U.S. Discovery crew is intrigued by the new addition, Lieutenant Ash Tyler. Sarek seeks Burnham's help, rekindling memories from her past, and Admiral Cornwell questions Lorca's tactics. And that's pretty close to the vest as far as a summary of an episode goes. And we're also... this episode features a return of Sarek, played by James Frain, of course, and something we can talk about in a bit, but a huge mention of an original series character, Spock. In particular, a major plot point rests on the very existence of Spock. And I don't want to do that thing that I do every week where I say that this is my new favorite episode, but might be my new favorite episode.
Yeah, right?
Like I said, I think last week, I really like the fact that the show, okay, they're going to do this serial storytelling. I like the fact that we can just get into it, and we're neck deep in it now. And this episode looks amazing. I mean, I got to give kudos to director Douglas Arnikoski for that, because it just looks fantastic in terms of the colors, and I think a lot of the shots were great. Screw that guy for directing Highlander Endgame, but that's a different story. Not a very good film. Have you ever covered the Highlander films on Generations Geek?
Oh, we haven't, and I haven't seen them either.
Uh-oh. There you go. Well, that leads to another question that I was going to ask you. I think that you have a show coming pretty soon, hopefully, about
Yes.
Alien? Or like
Yes, we have a show coming up about Alien,
right.
but we are part of the Chronic Rift Network, so on when the shows are released, there's kind of a schedule, and because our show came out of nowhere, it got folded into the schedule a little bit later than we had planned, but
sure.
It's coming up very soon,
Sure.
so keep an eye out.
And Alien is, your co-host and father, Scott, is, he's a geek from way back. And so I'm sure that you get exposed to a lot of like quote unquote classic geekery. But is there anything that is new, fresh, has come out this year or recently that you would put up against all this old stuff that he keeps dragging out?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea.
Teen Wolf. No, I don't know. I don't know
Oh,
if you watch Teen Wolf.
no, I don't watch Teen Wolf. Oh my God.
It's my tendency. Well, see, I feel like I exist kind of in the middle in that I'm not really old enough to remember Alien, but I immediately, as soon as I was aware of it, went back and watched it. And then I'm lucky enough to have made it to Star Trek Discovery, even like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica and new stuff like that. And so I feel like I can enjoy both of those things. But when you sit down to watch, say, original series or even TNG, are you like, okay, I got to dust off these guys and watch this and hope that it's good and sort of meets my standards for entertainment?
Not at all. I was gonna say that I'm like old enough to remember Star Trek Discovery, and that's pretty much all. And I grew up on TOS and all kinds of old movies, and I love them to death. And just this weekend, we were at my grandma's house, and they have this retro TV station out there. And I was playing a board game and heard Star Trek, the original series, come on, and immediately like stopped and moved so I could watch it, and then like refused to play anymore until I could go sit and watch for a little while.
Sure.
And any old movie that I watch, I love it. I have no complaints about watching older stuff.
Well, that's great. That's great. I think that is a great attitude, and a lot of it's really good too. I'm kind of doing a rewatch of the original series right now, just for fun, really. And I'm in the third season, and a lot of it is as bad as they say, but not all of it is as bad as. There's some good ones in the third season for sure. Well, Discovery doesn't have to deal with that just yet. We're only in the first season, and this is an episode that continues to develop the ongoing storyline of just what's going on in this Klingon war, spore drive situation. Hey, I got a question for you, totally out of nowhere. This has baffled me every week. Opening sequence, we see a lot of elements that return in the show. What are the green crystals that are flying around in the very first part of the opening sequence?
I honestly have no idea what you're talking about.
So it comes out, it's all, we're going to listen to the striking theme, very memorable, of Star Trek Discovery. And then the ship is being put together, and it's all these sort of drafting sort of design lines. And there's all these like little crystals that float by. Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about, and I don't have an answer for you.
I have no idea. Like, I don't think
just accept it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did too until this very moment. Like, it's not kryptonite. Dilithium is generally shown to be like white or pinkish, so I'm not even sure what it's supposed to be. But that's another mystery to send our investigative reporter that we'll have to hire out to go check that out. So this episode opens presumably on Vulcan, although it can't be Vulcan because I see two moons in the sky.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that it's Vulcan because, it's Sarek taking off from planet. And unless it's a gigantic planet like you see in the sky two moons, and of course we know Vulcan has no moon, and I feel like that they have violated that over and over again in the animated series episode Yesteryear that takes place on Vulcan. We see a moon in the sky. So what was Spock smoking when he said that? That's what I want to know, because apparently Vulcan totally has a moon. And it looks like Sarek is off on a diplomatic mission that we learn later on is to Klingons, to two leaders of two houses or factions that aren't necessarily on board for Cole's crusade against the Federation, although not everything is what it seems. And his ship is the victim of a bombing by this guy who does like, you've seen Iron Man 3, right?
Of course.
He does like an Iron Man 3 thing, where he gives himself extremis or something.
I was thinking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I really was.
Oh, that too. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that was a little weird. And he's part of the Vulcan, well, they call them Vulcan extremists. And I'm like, come on, you can't come up with like a name? Vulcans have cool names for everything. Like, what would the Vulcan extremist name be?
Isn't some of this stuff covered in Enterprise?
It might be. When I get to my Enterprise rewatch, I guess I'll know better. But possibly, I'm going to call them Vulcans. They're not Vulcans, they're Vulcans. But, yeah, dumb. Anyway, so we see them. It's the first appearance of them on this show. We see Mia Kirshner for the first time as Amanda. And as Sarek is going through this experience where he's apparently wounded and drifting in this nebula on his ship, he's lost in this sort of reverie or this oblivion of memory, which is, I assume, where we get our title Lethe from. And they have to use Michael Burnham and her connection to Sarek to sort of home in on him, which is convenient. It's convenient that they have that connection.
It is.
I think they call
it... It's been very convenient so far.
Well, it has. And I think they call it like a... See, they have a fun name for that. They call it a soul graft, which is they're somehow bonded or some kind of connection. Do you... Let me run something by you. Do you know the term Mary Sue?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so you're familiar with the term. If our audience isn't familiar, what it generally means, it actually came from Star Trek, or the world of Star Trek and Star Trek fan fiction, but it's the idea that an author writes a character, usually the main character, into their story that is supposedly, whether consciously or unconsciously, supposed to be kind of a self-insert character, and that character's like really cool and real good with a bat'leth, and like Captain Kirk wants them to like, you know, take the chair and fly her out there a little bit. And it's just, it's evolved into a character that just seems to have a lot of, to be kind of overpowered in the story and have a lot of things that are kind of connected to them. And I'm wondering how close you think Michael Burnham gets to the idea of that, if you believe in the idea of the Mary Sue.
That's an interesting question.
I ask the tough questions.
I have a lot of feelings about Mary Sue's in general because I think it's really easy to just equate it with, because let me start over.
Sure.
I'm not used to being on a live podcast.
You are now.
So many times I feel like fan fiction is written and people start calling the main character Mary Sue, but the fan fiction is written about a series or a book that features mostly male characters. So whether or not it's a self-insert isn't so much the problem as whatever girl is writing it isn't seeing herself and girls like her represented in her favorite thing.
Right.
So she writes it and it ends up becoming a Mary Sue. So I don't necessarily hate on it because I've been there.
Right.
Although I wouldn't call Michael Burnham Mary Sue, for me, I guess her mutiny would be something that would make her differ from any other Mary Sue character, like, ever.
Yeah.
Especially the way in which it happened, because her captain wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong. Her captain was following the rules.
Yeah.
And she made the decision that following the rules wasn't okay. And, like, actually physically assaulted her.
Right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think if I was writing a Mary Sue in Star Trek, my character would never do that.
Yeah.
I think that part of the hallmark of like a trademark Mary Sue is being a little bit of a flat character. Like, you can predict everything that's going to happen. Yeah. And I don't know how many people predicted that she was going to do that in the first episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really great point. I don't think that that's true necessarily. I'm not even validating like the concept, but up to this point, I assume, like, on the boards or the forums, there are horrible people who are leveling accusations of Mary Sue against the character in the show. Mm-hmm. And I've never felt that way. This is the first episode where I was like, well, that's really convenient. And it's like, she's got the special power, and so we got to just plug her into the thing and it'll be fine. Like, it was more of a question of, like, plot convenience for me than any thing about the character. Because, as you said, I totally agree. I still think that the character is, like, gloriously flawed. Especially in her actions in the first couple episodes, you know, and I'm having fun tracking her sort of redemptive arc. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you could plug her into the glowy thing and then she's going to be able to find Sarek, it was like, all right.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because doesn't Sarek do the same thing with, like, Captain Picard? Am I totally wrong?
The episode in TNG where they sort of mind meld? Yeah.
Yeah. So he has... so in the future, Sarek also grafts himself onto Captain Picard, but first he did it to his foster daughter
He's kind of liberal with his grafting. He'll graft with anybody, that guy. I think it's interesting that we do slightly, not as much as I'd like, but we do delve into the character of Sarek in this episode, and we explore something that always fascinates me about him, which is his fascination with humans. He's married a human several times. He raised, now we know, 2 human or half-human children, and we still don't have an answer. I'm not sure that we need one or that there'll ever be one about what he sees in humans, because he can be very. It's hard to read a Vulcan because they're so logical and sometimes disdainful, but I kind of wonder what it is. Maybe we're seeing it, the origin of this, when he raises somebody who's so exceptional like Michael Burnham, that sort of helps solidify his idea that humans are really great. But he'd already, met Amanda and had Spock at that point. So why do you think Sarek seemed to like humans so much?
I don't know if I could tell you. I really love Sarek. I love anything to do with a Vulcan.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just think he sees like a lot of good in people, especially since like humans were the ones to like kickstart the Federation, I feel like.
Right.
And I think he sees very early on that that's going to be a huge asset.
Yeah. Well, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
So at least he is right, or sort of predictive in that way. I think that it's, I don't know. I mean, it's just he really seems to like humans and human people, and I think it's funny how the show. I like the fact that Discovery has taken a lot of risks, and I like the element in this episode in particular in which we see that the Vulcans aren't happy about that. They're like, you know what? We don't want a human in the Vulcan expeditionary group or whatever it's called. Like, we're not interested in that. Spock, is going to go out and be in Starfleet or whatever, and that's fine, but we don't really want that. And then we get to see that Sarek has to make this choice. And what they've promised, I've read this week that the producers have promised that we'll never see Spock on the show, and I say good. But they have no problem leveraging the existence of his character in a major point where we see that Sarek basically has to make Sophie's choice. He's got to pick one kid over the other here, and he eventually sort of sponsors Spock and has to let Burnham go by the wayside. And it's heartbreaking, really, to see that for both those characters.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, that I was heartbroken. Obviously, it was a little hard with the freezing and everything, but I think this episode has been my favorite so far, just because what we get to see of Sarek, and we get to see Burnham like really fighting him on it.
Yeah. I like the fact that she feels that she can confront him.
Yeah.
And that we get. It was a little clumsy, although I know what they're doing. It's sort of like character beats, but at the end where she sits down with Tyler. And she's talking to him, and then she like reintroduces herself, and she's kind of like, beep, beep, boop, boop. What are my emotions? It's like, all right, we get it. You're raised by Vulcans. We understand. There's a lot of kind of name droppy stuff in this. They name drop the Enterprise specifically, which I thought was very interesting. And I think they're talking at the beginning about, if Tilly really wants to make captain, she's got to get off this ship and get onto a big starship like the Enterprise. And I think if she tries a little more, she could probably edge out Chekhov. I think she'd probably be okay if she just hangs around for a few years. Yeah. Also, the Vulcans are making such a huge deal out of not really wanting Burnham around. Sarek thinks that she could be a connection in between the two cultures. And we get, in my mind, a sort of negative space tease in that, are we in the Kelvin timeline or the original timeline or not? Because nobody says anything about T'Pol.
Do you think that it might be in the Abrams timeline?
Well, we've never, except for the fact that, David Mack, Anthony Rapp, many people connected to the thing have just said, yes, don't worry about it. It is. There are still many fans, and there's one conspiracy theory I want to talk about in a little bit, but we'll get there, who have this theory that it's like they're being cagey about what timeline it really is in. And so we get things like, oh, sure, Amanda. Well, she was in the Kelvin movies. We get Spock, but that doesn't really violate anything. We've got, Pike. We know that Pike is in the movies. We've never had anything really huge like, I don't know, Garth of Izar or T'Pol, or, we did get Archer. That's true. But I feel like T'Pol was a pretty big connection between the Vulcan and the human races.
Yeah,
Again, I haven't finished Enterprise.
I'm mostly scarred by her scenes with Trip on Vulcan, so
Yeah, all right. Fair enough. Forget I brought it up. Back to Ash Tyler. So are they going to make out or what? What's going on?
you
I
know,
think. Oh, go ahead.
last week when we talked, I said that I didn't trust him,
Yeah.
and I don't want to trust him, but that when they first sat down with him in the beginning of the episode,
Yeah.
what he said to her about like, he's like, I see you now like as a hard working Starfleet officer and like that's who you are. I think that was really sweet.
Yeah.
Like how many people have said something like that to her
Yeah.
when she got there? The first thing Tilly said to her was, "Oh, Michael, like the only girl I know of that's named Michael is the mutineer."
Right.
So it's interesting to see her form this connection with him when she was so cagey, even with Tilly, who was obviously just a sweetheart.
Yeah. I am finding myself really liking the character, which is why I think
Yeah.
it's too bad that he's hiding a secret. He's not actually from Seattle. He's from just outside of Seattle. And hey, if you've ever been to Seattle, that's a big deal. That's a huge difference. I don't know if you've ever gone outside the city limits of Seattle, but it goes from urban to Keith Urban real quick. There's no wonder that he's so good at hunting
It's
things.
exactly like that here.
Yeah, right. No, I'm talking about the real conspiracy theory that surrounds Ash Tyler. Have you heard this? Do you know about it?
No.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Hold on. Let me put my tinfoil hat on. Ignore the crinkling sounds. So fans on the internet have this theory. So you've got Shazad Latif, the actor who plays Ash Tyler. He also plays Clem Fandango on Stephen Toast or Toast of London, which you should watch if you haven't. He is playing Ash Tyler. His name has been in the credits since the beginning, which is weird because he just shows up in the 5th episode, right? In the meantime, you've got this character named Vok, who is the disciple of Takuvma. He's supposed to be the guy that if we're rooting for the Klingons, we're rooting for because he's going to, change the Empire and get everybody together and go do it. He's played by an actor named Javid Iqbal. If you look up Javid Iqbal on IMDb, he does not exist. I mean, he's got a page, he's got one credit, and it is Vok on Star Trek Discovery. There are no pictures of him on his IMDb page, which is very strange for like a young actor who has apparently got a big break in his first role. And people are theorizing that Shazad Latif plays Vok, that they are one and the same. Which then leads you to believe, first of all, why would they perpetrate this lie? And second of all, you get a character like Ash Tyler, who's so nice, and he's cute, and he's making eyes at Burnham, and he's helping her solve the problems, and they happen to just find him on a Klingon prison ship? That's weird. Really convenient. And people think that Vok has somehow gone to the matriarchs and, done something to himself and disguised himself so that he is... I thought everybody knew about this. Now I feel like maybe I'm wrecking the entire show, but it should be wrecked if they can't keep it secret. So it's really strange, and there's a lot of weird things. It could just be some kind of weird thing. Yeah, there's just this guy who's really good. We came red for the part. We cast him. He's never been acted before, but where's his picture? Where's his social media presence? He doesn't exist. So that's what people think. They think that somehow Ash Tyler will turn out to be Vok.
That's what people think, or that's what you think?
Oh, well, I'm starting to believe. I just report. I'm just a journalist, but I feel like it's a convincing theory. It's seductive.
I mean, I don't want to rule anything out, obviously, but it seems far-fetched.
What are the green crystals?
That now there's a Klingon on the special spooky Federation science ship, so he can cause some destruction.
Spy on
eventually.
them. Yes, right. Yes. Find the secret of their drive. Because otherwise, we've dropped out. I mean, where is Vok? Why aren't we following his storyline? It's been 2 episodes now since we've seen him.
I did notice that this episode.
Yeah.
That we only saw Cole. But wow, I feel like
It's
I've
coming around for you.
Not reading these conspiracy theories online.
Because the episode opens and he's playing paintball with Captain Lorca, and everything's working out there, and it's like, I want you on my ship, and so he's ingratiated himself with the crew real fast.
but he also, but he has records in Starfleet because Lorca had seen them. So then is the idea that Valk would be impersonating this dude who was taken prisoner?
Well, okay.
And the real Ash is like dead or still there?
Yeah, now you're asking me to defend a theory that's not mine, but if I had to, I would say, yeah, they captured this guy, they tortured him to death and got information. Maybe somehow he had clearance, or he knew about, what they were doing on the Discovery in the Glen. And so they swapped him out for Vok, and then that's kind of what we're doing now. And I think that the reason that we're even bothering, just from a screenwriter's perspective, the reason we're even bothering to have scenes where he's testing him about, like, where his favorite avocado place is in Seattle, is so we don't feel like the characters were so stupid for not even questioning later on. It's sort of like firming up his cover.
Yeah. Here's a follow-up question.
Yeah, please.
In a universe where this theory is true, is Mud involved?
That's a good question. And that could tie in.
Because they were like buddies. Not buddies, obviously, the opposite of buddies, but they knew each other for 7 months.
Oh, yeah.
So, plus Mud had him getting beaten up every other day.
Yeah. Maybe because he thought he could take it. I don't know. That would actually add a real dark spin to Mud's character. He wouldn't be fun Roger Carmel anymore if he was so complicit in this plot with the Klingons.
Yeah, he's not just a hardcore Slytherin anymore. He's like ready to kill all of humankind.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, let's lighten it up a little bit. Let's talk about my favorite alien for this week. My favorite alien this week is green hair, forehead, lizard face lady that we see for just a few seconds in the opening scene in the cafeteria. There was this girl.
Oh my gosh, I missed it.
Yeah, you got to go back and pause it. Like the first couple minutes in the first cafeteria scene where they're wearing their disco shirts. Really, show? Really?
Oh my gosh, I need one of those shirts so bad. I gasped when they came on screen with those.
But there's a lady who she has kind of pale skin, but then she's got like blue lowlights, in the jaw and her eyes, and then she's got looks like little greeny scales and green hair. Still no
Andorians though.
I know. I don't know. They've got their own ships. They're like the Vulcans. That's what it is. Stamets is back this week, and he's kind of he's a little different than he used to be.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad that you said that because his tone was different.
Yeah.
When that like weird thing when he basically just explained that the ship would blow up if the gas touched the mushrooms or whatever.
Right.
Okay. I'm glad that I'm not just crazy. That was a little out of character.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if they're doing a thing. He's got kind of a, hey, everything's great. It's like a Ken Kesey kind of.
Yeah, in the eyes.
He's eating his own mushrooms. Yeah, right. But it's a different side, and it's great to see Anthony Rapp be able to play a different side of the character and not just, really mean PMSing normal Lieutenant Stamets.
I'm honestly still really spooked by the end of the last episode.
I know. Yeah. And the fact that they just floated it and then, no, we're not going to come back to that right away.
I know. And then he was barely in the episode.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. A character who has barely been in previous episodes but is seriously in this one is Admiral Cornwell. And I can finally get her name right. It's Catherine Cornwell, I believe. We learn more about her. Or Cat. Yeah, Cat for short. We learned that she was a psychiatrist or a psychologist previously, and a doctor. And they have a little Admiral sexy time. She gets close to Captain Lorca. We find out that they probably were close previously.
Yeah, the second he took out that liquor bottle, I was like, this is not going in a direction that I want to see.
So, not on board shipping Lorca and Cornwell.
He freaks me out. We talked about this before about how he's different than any other captain.
Yeah.
And he is, and obviously he's an interesting character, but I prefer to trust my Star Trek captains.
Yeah, I don't trust him at all. Like when she told him, I'm taking the ship away, I was like, oh, honey, I hear a clock ticking and it's got your name on it.
I know.
And when she got on that shuttle, I was like, ooh, what's going to happen to that shuttle?
Yeah, I'm very worried about like when Lorca's gonna just snap, because the thing with the phaser like under his pillow, and then the last shot where he still has it in his waistband.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that he has a handle on any situation at all, ever.
Yeah. What do you think the scar things are on his back?
I have no idea. I thought it maybe was from just getting beaten up on the Klingon ship, but
Okay.
now that I think about it, it could be something else.
Yeah,
Like,
so much of their conversation has to do with past events, their time
yeah, we don't
together,
know about.
the Buron, yeah. So I thought maybe it had something to do with that, but I just wondered about the particular configuration, like why was it like a triangle and like a thing?
Yeah, I didn't notice anything about. I just saw the scars. I didn't notice anything about them, but
Yeah.
I was kind of like, we saw them screw with his eyes, but
Right, yeah. And it reveals a really dark side of him. I like the fact that, I mean, we just said, like, I don't trust him, and I thought he was actually going to cross a line for real, but
yeah,
he definitely did through inaction by going, she's fine. Yeah. Oh, no, we can't. It's too dangerous to go rescue her right now, because he knows if he goes and rescues her, he could lose his ship. So he is deciding to hold back when normally he would, rush where angels fear to tread.
yeah, I liked Sarah's reaction.
Yeah, because Sarah's like,
We usually
Captain, don't
use
we do the thing?
alternative thinking
This is when we
to get around these problems,
get out there.
Captain.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But he seems fine with it.
Yeah, I like the fact that even Sarah's like, yeah, let's get up on the horse. Let's do this thing.
And we're not gonna just go get her without asking.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah, so hopefully Admiral Sexy Time will come back, because I actually really liked her character in this episode.
Yeah, I did like when she was yelling at him after he pulled the phaser in bed.
Yeah. Well, it was great to see one character just say what we're all thinking, which is finally somebody sees that this guy is not put together. Like he's losing it.
I really enjoyed her just going off on him and then storming out. That was great. I mean, it did make me a little sad, his reaction to her saying that she was gonna, take the ship away.
Oh, he was desperate.
He seemed so sad.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did feel really bad, but I was also like, you're not okay.
Right, yeah, no kidding. Well, let's talk about the character that we tend to leave for the end of these shows. The main character, Michael Burnham, in this episode, who has an arc. I think it's somewhat of an abbreviated arc, but she does have an arc in this episode and reconnects with a traumatic memory of her past in Sarek's mind. I like the fact that they talk. I mean, the Vulcans can be so racist. And they were talking about how, you've already got your little experiment, and it's Spock, and now you want to make another one, and so what's going on with that? And you can tell. I mean, you wonder why she acts the way she does in the beginning of the show, and you realize how alienated and how alone she must feel, more so than Spock probably ever did, having being in a similar circumstance.
It's so interesting to me to see how other Vulcans treat Sarek.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of the stuff we've seen with him, like in TOS, is like, he's like Spock's estranged father, and he's like a cranky Vulcan.
Yeah.
And we see Spock as somebody who's a little more, loose with smirks.
Right. Yeah.
I'm really attached to Spock as a character.
Yeah.
And so any scene in Disco with Sarek that has anything to do with him, it just has me like, on the verge of tears.
Sure. I think that this scene, especially the scene, in his mind, the mind meld, really, I'd have to give props to the writers, because I think that the long game that they're playing is starting to kind of come out now. At a show like TNG or even the original series, you just kind of write week to week, and then if something really sticks or is neat, you can kind of bring it back or mention it. And in this case, it's sort of like sculpting the tiger. You take a block of marble and you cut away everything that doesn't look like a tiger. And so we've got a character that acts a certain way, and now it's being sort of revealed all the stations in their life that kind of creates and builds up this character. And I think that that's one of the reasons I really like this, is because we're starting to see how we get the Michael Burnham that we have now, and how she can hopefully kind of crawl out of being that Michael Burnham and be a better one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and before I had talked about how I didn't really like how it seemed like, especially on the Shenzo, that people were really pushing her to go back to being human and to leave what she had learned on Vulcan. And I thought that it was a little like, I mean, say what you will about them like suppressing their emotions, but I feel like their um like mental strength is really good, and I feel like as a human you could learn a lot from being raised there.
Yeah.
But seeing how her acting like a Vulcan could come from a place like, well, when I was growing up, everyone was racist. So the more I act like a Vulcan, the better.
Yeah.
I can see now why her people who care about her would want her to act more like a human, just to act more like herself, I guess.
And even the conflict that she has with the people who raised her, because she was raised by a Vulcan who I think she knew cared about her but couldn't show her love, and then there are members of his own race that try to blow her up because they don't like her and they don't like the fact that she's being raised by a Vulcan. So oh boy, she should get with Admiral Cornwell for a couple sessions. I think that would help.
Do you mind like a spoiler about Little Burnham on Vulcan from David Mack's novel?
I would say that if my listeners don't want one, they should probably plug their ears for 30 seconds. But I'll take a little one, sure.
Michael talks in the novel about how, well, I guess Spock and Michael talk about how much Amanda loved her. So Amanda on Vulcan really showed Michael like all the love and like especially like physical adoration, like hugs that she couldn't show Spock because Spock like was a Vulcan, like is half Vulcan, and so he was growing up in a way that all Vulcan kids did, and if Amanda gave that to him, then he would have even a harder time like in school and everything.
Right.
Already getting bullied for being half human.
Right.
And I think that's interesting because Sarek obviously just raised her like a Vulcan,
Right.
and isn't really taking into account that she is a human, and no matter how good she is at acting like a Vulcan, she's still a full human.
Sure.
So I don't know, just watching this, it was interesting to see Sarek sort of arguing with Amanda, and the way Michael interacted with Amanda like a little kid would with their mom, like, I want to go home, like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And then Sarek saying, that's a human emotion, like, knock it off.
Right. And even those emotional impulses, she clearly seemed like she was older, like a young woman, but her emotional impulses would even be sort of underdeveloped because she's not really allowed to use them. So, Alice in Wonderland is the type of gift that you might give her. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I also like the fact that they did a mind meld inside their mind meld. Yo, dog, I heard you like mind melds. So that was kind of cool. Well, I think we should check our threat ganglia. I don't think that I would have had Admiral Cornwall on the big board for not dying necessarily, but definitely going down this week. So who do you think is going to hit the big holodeck in the sky in future episodes?
Cornwall.
Cornwall. Okay. Yeah, probably.
The second they were like, yeah, let's just send like literally a representative from like the organization they're actually at war with.
Right.
Instead of somebody just from Vulcan, that seems smart. Like, why didn't they send another ambassador from Vulcan?
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe he'd get blown up again, but yeah. Yeah. And plus, okay, so the Vulcans or the Vulcan extremists or fanatics or whatever are the way they are. They don't want the war of the Vulcans, right? Like, I get that you want to kill Sarek, but maybe wait till he closes this deal.
Yeah, it was
Get him
an
on the way
interesting
back.
Time to strike,
Right,
for sure.
I'd still put Dr. Culber on the board there. I think it's probably going to be later rather than sooner, but I think his days are probably numbered as well. You have insight into, if not where the stories are going, but where they've been, as you just proved with your knowledge of Desperate Hours. Are you looking forward to Drastic Measures?
So much.
Yeah. You haven't managed to get your hands on like a galley copy or something like that yet?
I haven't.
Work your connections. Come on.
Actually this weekend, I turned to my dad and I was like, if I ask you one question about Discovery, will you answer it? Just one. And he like ignored me. And then I was like, Dad, just one question. And he was like, I'm not going to tell you anything, which I expected, but I wanted just one thing.
Yes. Well, you can aspire.
So I don't have any insight except for what's already out here for the rest of us, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I say you work real hard all your life. You become amazingly successful and rich, and then you can just buy it out of him. You can just say, Dad, I'll give you $1 million if you tell me.
That sounds like a perfect plan.
Yeah.
That would work.
That's what it's for. And, well, I guess you can find out with the rest of us when the book comes out on, I believe it's February 6th of next year.
Yeah, I will be at Barnes & Noble and or receiving it in the mail the day of, thanks to Amazon Prime.
Sounds good. Well, that's pretty much it for our show this week. Do you have any other thoughts about the episode that you wanted to share with us?
I love any episode centered around Vulcan. I can't say it enough.
Sure.
It's so cool. And I love watching Sonequa Martin Green act like a human who's grown up on Vulcan. And I actually said this when they released the first trailer. I was like, she is acting like a Vulcan raised on Earth or a human raised on Vulcan.
Right.
And she's so phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances that really come out that are great. Well, I want to say thanks for joining us to our listeners. If you like what you hear here, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EISTpod for updates and to get notified when new episodes of both Enterprising Individuals and Discoverage, this show, come out. And you can tweet to us on the show by using the hashtag Discoverage. Also, while you're on that internet, if it's working, unlike CBS All Access, why not head to your listening platform of choice, be it Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Play, and you can subscribe to the show, give us a rating and review if you think of it, because that really helps us out. And if you really like the show, tell a friend. Join us next week when we talk about the 7th episode of Star Trek Discovery, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. Ooh, la-dee-da. And it looks like it's a time loop episode. Every Trek series has to do a time loop type episode.
I'm so excited to see more of Harry Mudd.
And Harry Mudd is returned, yes.
Yep.
So God knows how he's mixed up in the entire thing. Ella, I want to thank you for joining me again on the show. It's been a delight.
Oh, thank you.
Remind people where they can find you online.
You can find me at generationsgeek.com, at generationsgeek on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find our upcoming podcast very soon if you use Apple Podcasts. You can find it on there at The Chronic Rift. Otherwise, you can find the link on our website later.
Sounds great. Thanks again for joining me. Thanks for listening, listeners, and we're signing off. This is Aaron for Ella saying live long and prosper.